This is WFYI News Now. It's September 20th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, the future of apprenticeship programs. The future of apprenticeship programs throughout the state. Democratic gubernatorial candidate Jennifer McCormick says Indiana needs to prioritize Hoosier citizens and businesses over utility companies' profits. And the oldest HIV service organization hosted its first HIV Advocacy Summit this week.
We can end the epidemic. We can end it. So anything that's a barrier to doing that, and these laws are, we want to get rid of and improve.
Those stories coming up. But first, Purdue University announced a potential on-campus voting center after receiving backlash over the lack of accessible polling sites in this year's general election. The joint statement from the university and the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections proposed the Cordova Recreational Sports Center as an early voting site for the upcoming election. This announcement comes after the university received much criticism for not having any polling sites on the West Lafayette campus. Indiana Democratic Party Chair Mike Schmuel says the lack of sites hinders young voters' ability to cast a ballot.
We have great young people that are going to Purdue and IU and Ball State and Notre Dame. We want them to be good voters, regardless of their politics. It's just good for democracy and it's good for our country.
Indiana's youth voter turnout declined by 9% from 2018 to 2022. The proposed location will provide further access to voting for students and faculty on the campus, according to the joint statement. There are also 2 other polling locations near the campus that are accessible to the college community. The election board will meet on September 27th to vote on the proposal. Indiana's voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins on October 8th. Industry leaders have a vision for the future of apprenticeship programs throughout the state. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Kirsten Adair reports on plans to develop a new professional education and training pathway for high school students.
Stakeholders say Indiana's high school graduates need more skills for employment, especially as fewer students choose a traditional college pathway. That led them to think about new employer-led professional education. More than 150 business, education, government, and nonprofit leaders made the plan and used a model from Switzerland as an example. The Swiss system encourages career exploration in middle school and early high school before placing students on an academic or professional path. Indiana will start by focusing on 5 industries with predicted shortages: banking, insurance, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and life sciences. Those industries must each identify competencies for students to learn. Additionally, the new framework requires new methods for career advising and permeability between the pathways. Stakeholders expect businesses to start hiring students under the new model by the end of 2026. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Kirsten Adair.
Democratic gubernatorial candidate Jennifer McCormick says Indiana needs to prioritize Hoosier citizens and businesses over utility companies' profits. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports McCormick unveiled the utility affordability plan Thursday.
The campaign notes that the average utility bill has increased by an average of about 84% in the last 20 years across Indiana's 5 investor-owned utility companies. Indiana's median household income has increased about 64% in that time. McCormick says rate increases come up in nearly every conversation she has with Hoosiers.
It's a business, and they have to raise those rates. They're questioning the pace and just the excessive amount at once.
McCormick's plan includes restoring higher net metering rates, the credits customers with solar panels get on their bills for excess energy they produce. Republicans phased out those higher rates years ago, and McCormick says that's because they're not looking out for citizens and small businesses. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
The Department of Justice has ordered Hendricks County to pay $300,000 and change its policies after alleging the county illegally denied zoning approval to an Islamic organization's proposed development. The organization wanted to build a mixed-use community development that would include a religious seminary, a school, and residential housing at 2 different locations in Hendricks County. The Justice Department alleges that in denying the approval, the county departed from its own zoning ordinances. It adds that the county treated the application worse than similar ones in response to community pushback. The county is required to adopt fair housing and religious land use policies, train its employees on fair housing requirements, and establish a plan for resolving future complaints. And for our final story today, community health centers and Ryan White HIV/AIDS program centers play an important role in expanding services and care for vulnerable populations, which includes HIV prevention and wellness. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports the state's oldest HIV service organization hosted its first HIV Advocacy Summit Wednesday to develop strategies for the upcoming legislative session.
The Damien Center event focused on different challenges these centers face when trying to provide services, including how HIV criminalization makes care more complicated. Carrie Foote is a professor of sociology at Indiana University, Indianapolis, and leads HIV Modernization Movement Indiana. She says Indiana has several laws that lead to the inappropriate arrest or prosecution of people living with HIV, which wastes state resources and has no public health benefit.
We can end the epidemic. We can end it. So anything that's a barrier to doing that, and these laws are, we want to get rid of and improve.
Foote says these laws lead to stigma around HIV that act as a barrier to testing and care. She also says HIV criminalization disproportionately impacts Black people, sexual minorities, and people who inject drugs, which makes health inequities worse. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
And that's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Dodlin, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday.